You didn't embezzle the company's money, did you?
Picking up the phone call from my father, the first thing I heard was him yelling, making my ears hurt. At my father's words, I found myself convinced that the time had finally come.
How on earth am I supposed to embezzle the company's money when I've retired? You're way off base.
Calmly saying that to my father, his tone seemed to have cooled down somewhat.
But...
I could hear his flustered voice over the phone.
But I do know who the embezzler is. What? Who is it? Name the criminal.
His voice getting louder again. His overpowering words made my ears hurt even more, but I also figured he must be desperate.
The one who's been using the money is...
The name of the culprit that I mentioned, my father seemed to be caught off guard. He was completely speechless. My name is Henry Hawkins. I've been working in the accounting department of my father's company for 8 years now. I have a brother, Bob, who's handsome and talented, the sort people typically call Mr. Perfect. I've always been compared to Bob and have lived my life in his shadow. Since childhood, Bob has always demonstrated exceptional talent and has been admired not only by our parents, but also by friends and teachers. From a young age, I knew my parents doted on Bob because of his talents. There were times during my adolescence when I desperately wanted to receive some love from my parents, but in the end, all my efforts were in vain. Even when I was chosen as a regular player in soccer, Bob, who joined the team later, took my spot. And even if I studied more than anyone else for a test, Bob, who crammed at the last minute, would get higher scores. There were 1 or 2 times when I achieved better results than Bob, but seeing my parents comforting Bob, I decided to give up on everything. Rather, I started to think positively that I could live a relatively free life because I was not expected as much as Bob. However, I wasn't allowed the freedom to choose where to work. It was naturally decided that I would join the company run by my parents. Of course, it wasn't because they valued my abilities.
Even you should be able to be of some help. Help out with the company.
Even if I was deemed less competent than Bob, as long as I was a family member, it was mandatory for me to support the family-run business. When Bob joined the company, my parents handed the company over to him in just 5 years. For a while, I was able to work peacefully in the accounting department, but when Bob became the president,
"It's a nuisance if you interfere in my management,"
he started saying. I don't remember ever meddling unnecessarily. In fact, I recall giving my opinion with the company's best interests in mind. I wonder if that's what they consider meddling. As I was about to rebuke, Bob continued with a smirk.
"You're incompetent, Henry. Incompetents get in the way, so please leave."
I was about to say a lot of things, but when I heard that, my will to argue disappeared entirely. I agreed to leave the company.
I'm relieved you understand your own incompetence, Henry."
As I packed up my things, Bob teased me until the very end. Being the CEO seems to be quite a leisurely job.
"You're the one who said I should leave. Once I do, never get involved with me again." "Ha, of course. I'm the one who is saying no to you. Don't come crying to me when you're in a financial pinch, Henry."
Bob replied with a broad smile. I left the company in a rather forced way, but it's not like I was attached to it. Rather, I felt a strange relief that I was finally able to quit. Finding a new job took longer than I had anticipated. I suspect Bob had probably been putting pressure on related companies. It was hard and took time, but I still managed to find a job that I was satisfied with. It's not a big company, but the people are warm and kind. No one looks at me as an inferior elder brother, as they did in my previous company. "Have you gotten used to the work?" A woman peered into my face as I faced the computer, showing a kindly smile. She is Sonia Smith, the CEO's daughter of this company. When you hear the term CEO's daughter, you might think of someone arrogant and pampered, but she is not like that at all. Although it's clear that she is doted on by the CEO, she is considerate and caring, even worried about me who just started working here.
Yes, thanks to you.
With a smile, the released-looking Sonia moved away from me and went back to her seat. Thanks to Sonia's care, I was able to get along with my colleagues quickly. And by the time a few months had passed since I switched jobs, my relationship with Sonia as an individual had also deepened. If we finish work at the same time, we often have dinner at a nearby restaurant. There were no such interactions at my father's company, and I found it refreshing. One day, as I was enjoying my current work life, I received a call on my smartphone from a man I had thought I'd forgotten about. That day, I had unusually finished work early, so I was thinking of heading home quickly to rest. Just as I returned home, my smartphone rang. I tensed up momentarily thinking it was a call from the office, but when I saw Bob's name on display, I felt drained. I contemplated not answering the call, but it showed no signs of stopping. It seems like he would immediately call back even if I hung up, so reluctantly, I decided to answer the call.
Hello, brother. You're slow to answer, aren't you? Are you managing well with that attitude?
Bob was as usual, and I could tell he was lounging around even on the other end of the phone.
What do you want?
I was eager to end the call quickly, so I asked him directly what he wanted. Why would he bother to call me, from whom he had supposedly cut ties?
There's a woman named Sonia Smith at your company, isn't there?
I lost my voice for a moment.
I happened to meet her at a party I attended the other day. After talking to her, I found her to be a modest and good lady, so I thought I'd like to get closer to her.
His voice over the phone was pretending to be calm, but he must be smirking disgustingly. I couldn't see it over the phone, but I could easily imagine it.
Don't tell me you're asking me to mediate between you two. You're surprisingly perceptive, brother. That's helpful.
I felt an impulsive urge to hang up the phone right then. But somehow I held back, took a deep breath, and opened my mouth calmly.
Didn't you have a girlfriend who was a daughter of a company president?
I remembered that when I was working at another company, at the same time as I helped Bob become president, he was engaged to the daughter of a collaborating company. I hadn't talked to her, but as far as I heard, she seemed to have a personality that suited Bob. As much as Bob was adored, I couldn't believe that his father would approve of him having two girlfriends at the same time. When I asked him this, Bob began to talk in a wary tone.
That woman. Her company's in financial trouble. I broke up with her because I don't want her to cause trouble for me.
It was a typical story for Bob. Despite being engaged, he cut off the relationship cleanly because she was in financial difficulties, which can be said to a proper understanding of a political marriage in a way, but it was something I absolutely could not cooperate with.
Even though we're in the same company, she is the president's daughter. She's not someone I can casually talk to. It's impossible for me to mediate for you.
In fact, we met face to face every day, and we even go out to eat several times a week. But if I told Bob this, I could only foresee trouble in the future. So I decided to refuse by making up some excuses.
Well, that makes sense. It's impossible for a regular employee like you, bro.
It seems like he was satisfied with that. The call ended somehow that day, but after that, I started getting frequent calls from him. Whenever he asked me the same question, he'd say,
You're at the same company after all. You should be able to find some common ground if you try.
I denied it, saying that's ridiculous, and I hung up the call this time. I kept getting the same call day after day, so I stopped answering it out of annoyance. And then I started getting calls from my father, not from Bob.
I thought I wasn't involved anymore. This isn't about work. You know about this from Bob too. We need you to help deepen the relationship between Miss Smith and Bob.
That was something I had wanted to hear from my parents when I was a child. Even though I had yearned for it, it didn't resonate with me now that it was said.
I can't do that. If the two of them get married, it will be good for our company and the company where you work. Do you understand that?
The only feeling I had while listening to my dad's words was annoyance. I ended the call without saying anything. One day, as the days of receiving calls from Bob and my parents continued, Sonia invited me to have dinner together after work. To be honest, I was thankful for the proposal because I would only feel fed up with the calls from my parents if I was alone. We decided to have dinner at a nearby restaurant, just like usual. As soon as the food was served, Sonia opened her mouth with a troubled look. "Have you been in touch with your brother lately?" I had previously told Sonia about my family and why I changed jobs. So, even though she knew I wasn't on good terms with my brother, I had a bad feeling when she suddenly asked me that.
Did my brother do something?
Well, yeah. Sonia didn't deny it. I guess there must have been an opportunity, as Bob had mentioned that they had met at a party before. I felt somewhat uncomfortable hearing that, but that's not the issue right now. Since he calls me his own brother every day and annoys me, he might be doing something disrespectful to Sonia. As I was worried, Sonia stared intently at my face.
What?
"You don't look much like brothers, do you?" These words of Sonia bring back memories of my childhood.
The younger one is outstanding, but the older brother is not so much.
"They don't look like brothers at all. They don't resemble each other." These are words that were repeatedly said by various people. Sure enough, my parents and Bob had been told worse things. An unpleasant memory crossed my mind, but I opened my mouth as if to shake it off.
If you're willing to take advice, you should stop hanging out with Bob.
I knew it was none of my business, but I felt like I had to say it. Since changing jobs, Sonia had been kind to me. I don't want her to be unhappy. That's what I was thinking when I said it, but surprisingly, Sonia said, "I feel the same way." She smiled wryly and took a sip of water. "I'm not particularly interested in getting close, but my father is worried." "Hey, do you know his secret?" She whispered as if gossiping. I was a little surprised, and then I opened my mouth.
Is it the same story I know?
"Who knows? Probably a different story." She smiled smugly. Several weeks after having dinner with her, I received a call from my father on my phone. There used to be frequent contacts, but recently it's been quiet. Surely he must have been too busy to deal with someone like me.
"Hello, Dad. I can't mediate." "That's not why I called today. You haven't embezzled money from our company, have you?"
I didn't expect to be shouted at right off the bat, and the sudden yelling hurt my ears. For a moment, I thought about shouting back, but apparently that's not the situation. Understanding my father's words, I realized that it's finally time.
"How could I, who have resigned, embezzle company money? That's a ridiculous accusation." "Well, but..."
His voice is flustered on the phone as he calms down a bit. I sighed heavily.
But I know who the embezzler is." "What? Who is it?"
The volume of my father's voice rises as he demands the culprit's name. His commanding tone makes my ears ache even more, but I guess I just don't have the luxury to worry about that. I think it may be too late, even if the perpetrator is identified now, but still, I name the culprit. The one who's been dipping into the funds is Bob.
"What did you say?"
When I uttered Bob's name, my father was completely speechless, as if he hadn't anticipated this at all. It's not surprising. He chose the younger son, Bob, who is more competent over the older son, to be the CEO of the company, never expecting that Bob would be embezzling company funds. I became aware of this fact when I was still working in the accounting department. At first, the amount was small and I didn't notice, but it got bolder and bolder, and before I knew it, a large sum of money had been embezzled. The only one who could have done this was Bob, who had become the CEO. There's no future for the company at this rate. I was thinking it's going to topple soon. Probably Bob has realized that I know about his embezzlement. That's why he made me quit quickly. It might be hard to believe, but if you look at the accounting documents I left, you'll understand immediately. Do you want to see the evidence I have? I promised to sever ties, but I didn't know what's going to happen after I left the company. That's why I kept a copy of the evidence I had collected. My father, who had just uttered the words, "I can't believe it," fell silent at my words. But the story isn't over yet. And the money he embezzled is being used for an affair with some married woman. A married woman? My father's voice, more than surprised, sounded utterly exhausted. This was news to me too. It was found out by the CEO, who loves his daughter and was angry at Bob, who was always around Sonia. Sonia told me about it when we went out for dinner. At this rate, the company is going to go bankrupt. It might be the first time I've heard such a weak voice from my father. I was just silently listening. Can you help me out with some funds? Can you talk to the president of your company for me? If we can form a partnership with the Smith Group, we can turn our company around. My father yelled out as if he had come up with a brilliant idea. In reality, I do think that's the only way to save the company. But facing my father asking for help for the first time over the phone, I felt terribly indifferent. I'm sorry, but I can't. I've already severed ties with you all. What? You? I cut off the phone call before my father could finish his sentence. My father called me many times after that, but I blocked my parents' and Bob's numbers, finally freeing myself from the constraints of my family. It felt even better than I had imagined. In the end, it seems that Bob went bankrupt not long after that. He was left with debts. My parents and Bob, who had treated me as incompetent, are now being chased for repayment. Do you ever worry about your family? Sonia asked me curiously as we ate pasta together after work. Since that incident, I feel that I have gotten even closer to Sonia. Now we're together almost every day. Thinking that I too need to muster up some courage soon, I replied, "No, I'm fine." I'm relieved to hear that. Sonia showed a relieved expression, then smiled. I'm really glad you're nothing like your brother. What do you mean by that? As I stopped to drink some water and asked Sonia, she showed a mischievous grin. It means you're not like him. Realizing that I'm not hurt by her words anymore, I was taken aback. It's a secret. She laughed, looking very happy. Watching Sonia like that, I felt an even stronger desire to spend more time with her. To protect my current company and Sonia, I'll continue to work hard. With that, I made a firm resolve.